So I made a basic like mushroom broth. And I was tasting it. The chef came in and gave me like a swig of his cold brew. And I still had like a little bit of that mushroom soup flavor stuck on my tongue as I was like taking a swig of the cold brew. And I was like, oh, this works.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Today on the show, we have a really fun conversation with Jon Kung, a Detroit-based chef and TikTok creator we've fallen hard for over the past couple of years. We wanted to have Jon into the studio to talk a little bit about TikTok, his life online and off, but mostly we wanted to dig into his terrific new book, Kung Food, Chinese-American Recipes from a Third Culture Kitchen. Man, I really love catching up with Jon, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Jon Kung, welcome to This Is Taste. What's up, buddy?
Hey, thank you for having me. So great to be here.
Man, last time I saw you, we were at the Shinola Hotel in Detroit having a nice lunch outside. Man, I love your town.
Yeah, you should go back. The building that was across the street from where we were dining, like al fresco, is almost done now. It is probably the first major, most impressive building Detroit has seen since probably like the Renaissance Center was built. Yeah.
Maybe like the Silver Dome. Just kidding. Just kidding. That's like truly one of the most garish buildings. I'd love to hear about what's your take on what's been going on in Detroit. I have such pride. I'm from the west side of Michigan, but what's going on in Detroit right now?
I mean, it's an interesting energy that is happening. The thing that, as a Detroiter that's been there for like, I don't know, we're going on to like the better part of 20 years now. But there has been so much investment in the city's outdoor spaces and parks. And I'm a runner. I paddleboard on the Detroit River every summer that I can. I notice these things. And there has just been rollout after rollout of like new and grand, like $1 million investments in parks and paths. I think Detroit is finally leaning into the fact that it is like the biggest city in Michigan, and Michigan is home to like some of the most beautiful outdoor spaces and natural landmarks in the country. And so the fact that we are claiming that, it's just like a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's so well said, and also on the food scene, you've got this incredible these pockets of these cultural neighborhoods and these chefs cooking their own food, and we'll get into your story. But then you've got the farms, like you go out 20 minutes and you're in some of the most lush farm territory in land.
Yes, and we have Eastern Market, which is the city's like jewel of a farmers market district. I think it is like the oldest. It's the oldest, largest, continuously running farmers market district operating in the United States. I think it has that title so long as you use all those words. And and people have like a really good connection. Like even though Detroit is a very just large city, like a deeply dense urban area, our connection with food and farmers access to farmers in that way via the market itself is very in tune, I think. And then we have like tons of urban farms that have been popping up since like 2000 and I want to like say 9 or 10, and they have been continuously running since then. So I think there is a deep connection to food. There is still like a little bit of, I think, an underappreciation for the local produce, but it's really quickly becoming more, I guess, sophisticated in a way.
Absolutely. And when you head west too, you've got fruit.
Yes.
Which Abra Behrens and I have talked about at length. I'll link to that in the show notes. I feel like the west side and the fruit belt of Michigan is underrepresented. I mean, do you feel that you cook a lot with the fruit that's in Michigan?
So I think like I really like my appreciation for apples really kicks in. For me, I'm very much like grapes in the summer, and in the fall and winter, I'm all about apples. And people think that apples generally tend to be a pretty boring fruit, but of course they're thinking of like the red delicious apple. Yeah. But then if you get into like heirloom varietals of apples, if you start eating have cider apples, for example, like they have such complex flavor and such like a super satisfying texture to just bite into, like that crisp and that crunch. I think apples are something that, you know, obviously Michigan cherries, you think of that.
Yeah. Very short
but-
season, though.
Yeah, very short
unfortunately.
season. Comes like a flash in the pan, but apples, man.
Yeah.
And of course you got like cider and cider donut
No,
season.
it's the best apples. Thanks for calling that one out. Okay, so you're pushing 40 and you're big on TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, first off, yes, I hear that. I love that. I'm here for that. But second, like, what's that like? I mean, you're definitely not in the demo for that platform, but you've excelled on that platform.
It's been very interesting. I think this is my third or fourth year in this career as a person in social media or a new media content creator. And I just walk around in life now just expecting to be the oldest person in the room. Which, you know, in the real world, that is not true. Like at 39, like I'm not always the old, but like I feel that way. So I don't know. I think I have this warped view on what age is at this point. And I do have like peers who are also content creators, like the Korean vegan. She is slightly older. She's like my big sister.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's working with and communicating constantly with like what I always can only assume as a younger audience because I don't see them most of the time. Just like we interact through comments and stuff. I don't know. I guess it must have had a change in me mentally that I was just not prepared for. But I think it happened so gradually that I just didn't notice.
You didn't even notice it, but
Yeah.
you clearly rolled with it too. And like your voice doesn't age stamp you at all.
Yeah.
You obviously don't recognize, you know, your age in a way.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not going up there and being like, well, hello, fellow kids or anything like that. But I will say, I think there are a lot of people on TikTok, or no, especially YouTube. They assume that I'm much younger than I am because one of the most common negative comments that I get is that these people are like they call me pretentious a lot.
Really?
Yeah, and I just
I don't
don't
get
think they
that.
see them. I just think that if they assume that I'm like in my 20s and like if you're like this self-assured and probably just a little bit tired and sleepy in your 20s, you just come off as pretentious. But like, no, I'm almost 40. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
It's funny how like wisdom and like confidence reads as pretension for a certain age.
Right.
Very. Do you use words like fire? Do you use fire?
I do not.
Okay. Do you use like torched?
I do use well, I do use these things in cooking context, but like
yeah.
I don't say. Do people say
Well,
torched
torched
outside of?
is a 20s lexicon for like stale or old or dusty.
I
isn't
don't know any of this.
I mean, thank God, thank you, John. I used a fire in a previous episode of the podcast, and my wife was in the car while we were listening to it, and she was like, "Stop the car, cringe, stop using fire."
Yeah.
So I have to say on the record that I'll probably not use fire again.
Yeah, I think like for me, fire is just like a term that you use on the line, and torch is something that you associate with creme brulee.
Well said. It's totally more cooking term.
Yeah.
John, I want to ask about the book and like, how do you come to the realization that it's time to write a book? You're very articulate with your progression from a chef to a creator, and I feel like you didn't want to rush things, but clearly you decided this was the time.
Yeah. The decision. The way that the book came to be was like a lot of things just fell in place. I never thought for myself that I would write a book. Like when I was still cooking, the idea of writing a book was not something that I would think that I would be doing until I was like maybe 50, 60 years old, a couple of restaurants under your belt. Hopefully they did well enough that people would care enough. But, you know, at this time, just because of the newfound fame through TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, the book deal came first. The book deal came before any restaurant that I was even preparing to build. So, I mean, you don't pass up an opportunity like that. So it presented itself through an editor, Raquel at Clarkson Potter.
Pelzel, right?
Yeah. She sent me an email after a Zoom meeting involving two different authors, asking if I was interested in writing one. And after that, she hooked me up with a couple of agents. I selected one. I wrote a book proposal and we sent it back and they accepted it. It was probably not the most traditional path towards a book, I would say, but Well, maybe now it's pretty.
It's
more and more
I was
common
gonna
for
say,
people
John,
who are on
it's
TikTok
definitely
now.
how we roll here at Crown, at Clarkson Potter and 10 Speed.
Yeah.
And speak about those here specifically. I've done books outside of this company as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I love the way Raquel and other editors here work. They reach out because they love you and your content.
It's almost like a scouting of talent in a way, and then like building it based off of that. And I see it happening with a lot of other content creators and the books that they make, the beautiful books that they make. And yeah, I'm just very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into the book now. And really, John, I love this book. I think this got so many wrinkles in here. You've got this, the writing is crisp. The writing is meaningful. It's not like you phoned anything in. Like I've just keep diving into it. I've had it for several months, and I've had the PDF and had the physical copy, and you really just got to go check out this book. It's really fresh. I want to start and ask about fusion.
Mm-hmm.
And quote, nobody wants their food labeled fusion, which is funny because that is what most American chefs cook, myself included. This is a quote from the book.
Yeah.
Really well said. I'd like to get into this a little bit because I think you have a lot to say about it.
I think fusion became just it became such a not, I want to say taboo, but people didn't really think too highly of any food that labeled itself fusion, especially after the 2000s. Like it was a big thing in the maybe like 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the food that came was of that, like the term Asian fusion, it was so generic and it was so based off of like an outsider's point of view of what to do with the Asian ingredient, which is like, turns out to be superficial use of a technique or that ingredient itself. It was always one-sided, and it came from the perspective of usually a white male chef, just, playing around with soy sauce or oftentimes teriyaki sauce or spicy mayo or that kind of thing. So, I don't think a lot of people wanted to be associated with that. And certainly a lot of people who came on later in the scene when like a lot of Asian cooks came up, they didn't want their food to be labeled as fusion because in their mind it was just like poor use of the ingredients that they loved.
Yeah, because it was being done so poorly.
Yeah.
This fusion cooking. But as you write, it's evolved and it's how we cook today.
Yeah. No, if you look back in food and in the history of a recipe and the history of ingredients and how they travel throughout the world, like every food, every dish, every cuisine in some way, shape, or form is fusion in a way. If you look back enough, it's all fusion.
I agree. You then kind of pivot into a conversation about third culture cooking, which I think is a more articulate way to talk about fusion.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, let's talk about third culture cooking and how does that represent your style of cooking?
Well, third culture cooking, it comes from the term of a third culture person or a third culture kid. And in that is somebody who grew up constantly moving in between cultures within their everyday lives. So the culture of their parents or whoever raised them, the grandparents, whatever, and then the culture of the world outside of their home in which they were raised. So a kid that went to school every day experienced the culture of somebody. Maybe they were a Mexican-American family or Vietnamese-American family. The culture that they had at home was very much different from the culture that they experienced when they went to school or not. Mm-hmm. And that day-to-day interaction and that day-to-day immersion just gives you access to like nuances of things and with things like communication, certainly food, certainly art and entertainment. Mm-hmm. And it is something that it's a lived experience. And that translates, I think, so strongly in different kinds of expressions. Certainly, I first saw it in a lot of fashion, a lot of visual art mediums. And more recently, including through my book, it being expressed through food as well.
So let's give you an example then of how you personally lived a third culture, your own background, mm-hmm. and the you're talking about the two communities that you were pulled between.
Yeah, so I had, like, my childhood was spent between Hong Kong and for a large part in Toronto. And yeah, the culture that I had in my home was very much that of like Hong Kong Chinese. I like the type of food that I had when I was at home was like Spam fried rice, fried chicken wings that were marinated in fish sauce, Hong Kong borscht, those type of stews and stuff, and congee. But then when I go to school, like it's that almost like that big fat Greek wedding trope. All I wanted in life was a ham and cheese sandwich, but I was taking thermoses of cup noodles, of noodles, in which people back then were even like grossed out by the fact that I was eating instant noodles from a thermos.
Yeah. And now they have like subscriptions to like the instant ramen.
Oh, of course. And now everybody wish they had the issue 1 of Lucky Peach, the ramen issue.
Totally.
Yeah. Which I do.
You do? I was just talking to somebody about issue 1. She had like 3 through 7 and then some of the teens. You got issue 1.
I have every single issue of that.
No way. We just had Chris Ying on the show. I never actually asked him about if he has a collection, but do you go back to those and read Lucky?
I'm actually afraid to touch them now.
It'll get you, maybe retirement.
Right.
Well, Jon, thanks for sharing the way the book is, your background and how a little bit of context for what third culture cooking is. I want to ask about the Hong Kong borscht. Specifically, you have a great recipe. And I was just intrigued by this idea of Hong Kong borscht. What is it?
So Hong Kong borscht, people think that it is something that I came up with, but it is actually a very traditional Hong Kong dish with like an amazing story. So it's not just my recipes that I consider to be third culture, but it is also a collection of recipes that are in their very nature third culture, but it is just it. These recipes have just existed before the term existed. So Hong Kong borscht was made by, obviously, borscht was created by the Ukrainians who traveled through to Russia. Well, through the periods of political unrest, these chefs would travel from Ukraine to Russia to down into Shanghai. Unfortunately, they had their turn in civil unrest. So they eventually migrated to Hong Kong. And how that dish kind of changed was they just really wanted to maintain the redness and I think the tartness that came innate in borscht. But unfortunately, we weren't very big on beets in China. But what we did have was, for some reason, tomatoes. So the red and the sourness came from the tomatoes, and it went from this creamy, pureed soup into like a very brothy beef-based with vegetable stew. And it was something that you could see in the 80s in Hong Kong at like tea shops and right next to a corn chowder type style soup that we have there as well. And it was like an iconic dish. I had it coming home from school all the time. It's not an easy one. It's not an easy thing to do. When you're cooking oxtails, everything always takes a ton of time. But it was delicious, and it was hearty, and it was tart and just as red, and it just played into like what these traveling chefs did to appease the local population, but also did the best they could to remind them of home.
What's the tartness? What's the acidity in the dish?
It comes from the tomatoes.
So the tomatoes, is there any vin in there at all, or is it just from the tartness from the tomatoes?
Oh, you could add some if you
want to.
Yeah.
I gotta tackle this.
It's great. And there's also like an Instapot version of it in the book, I think.
Yeah.
I know there are like a couple of really, really involved like stovetop, like 5-hour on the stovetop recipes. I tried to also include it in like a more accessible way to get that done.
It's cool. This book is just the recipe writing, and they just jump off the page, and I have a few more questions. One is the coffee mushroom broth, which is super inventive.
Yeah.
It's a savory coffee, but I'm curious when you actually serve it, because it's really cool. Talk about it, what it is, and when you serve it.
So I was going through this kick, and when I say kick, I mean like the studio that I lived in at the time did not really do a very good job in maintaining heat in the building. So we would constantly wake up to like a room that was 40 or 50
February
degrees.
Michigan too.
Yeah, it was terrible. So I started this idea of just making broth and soups for drinking in the morning as a way to wake up and as a way to warm up. So I started making breakfast broths. And how that particular soup came to be was I was working at a restaurant called Gold Cash Gold in Detroit at the time, and I was just put in charge for this, I think, event that we were doing of just like making a vegetarian or vegan option broth. And so I just used what we had at the restaurant. We had like a bunch of dried mushrooms, we had a bunch of vegetables, so I made a basic like mushroom broth. And I was tasting it, and then the chef came in and gave me like a swig of his cold brew. And I still had like a little bit of that mushroom soup in like flavor stuck on my tongue as I was like taking a swig of the cold brew, and I was like, oh, this works. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
let's give this a try and see like how far I could take this. And so I was doing my own dinner series for a birthday later on, I think the next few months later. And so I just made like a coffee broth. Like, I've always been into like drinking broths out of mugs. And so I made one that was almost like a mushroom cappuccino with like a pea milk foam on top, and I used like a morel mushroom grated on top so it looked like chocolate. And the people were like, they were blown away. So this is kind of like, I guess, a diner coffee version of that.
with like the diner mug style. I love the photo.
Which I love.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is part of a groups of broths that are meant to be made over the course of the day, but then kept in the fridge to be warmed up in the morning for you to drink in the morning.
Very cool to have a savory breakfast with a
Yeah.
little bit of caffeine kick in there.
Yeah.
Really inventive stuff. We were talking before off mic about last night you cooked at Bonnie's and you did a wonton flight.
Yes.
I like to get into wontons. You have this fried curry lamb wonton and it uses cream cheese. And I want to get a sense of what the cream cheese is doing and how you think about wontons.
Yeah. So like wontons, rangoons, and fried dumplings in general, I just... You know, like with the history of the fried wonton and the fried rangoon, it was almost like an outsider's romanticization and completely inaccurate perception of what Chinese food was. Like, as we know with the rangoon, it was like probably more along the lines of something the Polynesian. But it became something that was so beloved in this city and so expected of Chinese American food that I just like figured, well, we all leaned into it. We might as well continue leaning into it because it is absolutely delicious and so much fun to eat. And so me going into these fried dumplings and seeing like how far I could take it and how far I could like bring it into kind of like the inclusion of what our culinary like zeitgeist, I would say, is now, which is thinking very diversely, very globally.
Like curry.
With the curry elements. And just like, you know, kind of cooking things with the intention of serving it to other people in the sense that like they might be familiar with it or appreciative of it as well. Like that's really the reason behind all of that.
How do you make a wonton then in essence? How does the cream cheese play into it? Just like what's the food chemistry there? Because
it just holds it all together.
Yeah,
and it's just creamy and it's just gooey and it's just delicious. Yeah, and of course, like, you know, any kind of creamy element mixed in with the flavors of curry is just amazing.
It's really like curry mayo.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so good. I love that you have a section for wontons and rangoons.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Walk us through Fago Orange Chicken, which it's a tribute to orange chicken, or the Chinese American takeout orange chicken, but also one of Michigan's greatest exports, which is Fago.
Right. Mostly people from Michigan and maybe some juggalos wouldn't understand.
Oh my gosh, you had to reference the juggalos.
I mean, I know they're the ones that would be like the most excited to make this probably.
Do you drink rock and rye once in a while?
Every now and then. Actually, I have a friend he's the chef at a restaurant called Takoy, and he makes rock and rye ribs, and those are delicious. Yeah.
Soda ribs, like Dr. Pepper ribs, rock and rye ribs,
yes.
So good.
I'd never actually had the Panda Express orange chicken until probably, I want to say like 2021, 2020 sometime. And I understood it to be like an iconic Chinese takeout dish. And when I tried it, it's sweet, it's savory. It probably hits the spot for a lot of people, but as a cook and as an appreciator of Chinese cuisine, it was kind of like one note, but it was fine. And so I did a little bit of research and I looked in to see like where this could have possibly come from. And it might have origins, I think, and I wrote this in the book, it might have origins in like Hunanese cuisine, where it was just like a stir-fried dish using orange peel, and it was much spicier, and it was obviously a lot less sweet. So I wanted to do something in combination with that, but I also, as I like to do, want to include my surroundings and locations and pay homage to where I am in that specific point in time when I do it. And around the corner from me is DeVries, a 100-year-old cheese shop in Eastern Market. And I know that they sell Faygo there, out of the glass bottles still.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
That's how I grew up drinking it.
Right.
Yeah, I love those.
Instead of like the 2-liter plastic ones.
Yeah.
But so I bought a couple of ones of those, and I was like, how? And like my mission was to incorporate the Faygo in a meaningful way. Also, Faygo orange chicken just sounds like it works.
Oh, yeah.
So it is spicier. It is a little more balanced. It is obviously a lot more time consuming than just getting takeout.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is, if that is more your speed, by all means, enjoy yourself. But yeah, this was something that I just wanted to kind of bring, to create a dish that was home for me in multiple ways.
It's cool because you're doing the marinade first, and then you're frying it using a dredge and a batter or some of that sort, and then you're making your glaze, right?
Yeah,
You're tossing it, in a wok.
Yeah. Which is a very like standard way to make like your Chinese takeout fare, which is a lot of it is just like dredge, batter, fry, and then toss it in a sauce.
Yeah.
There are a couple of recipes that are like that, such as like the Canadian ginger beef that's in there, mapo paneer that is in there. So if you learn that technique, know that you're not just doing it for one recipe. But it is also a technique that can take you really, really far because a lot of takeout places cook with that specific
And as
way.
we know, you can do a lot of it ahead.
Yeah.
You could fry ahead and then just toss, to order.
Or even just make the sauce the day before.
Make all the sauces the day before those hold. I mean, for a dinner party, who doesn't want Faygo
orange chicken?
Right. Sounds super good. As an aside, what's your take on Detroit pizza?
Oh, it's superior.
Love it. I mean, more. Let's just go. Let's get some tape.
We used to be like better representation of it outside of the city, though. I have been to a couple of non-Detroit specific chains. I think like I haven't had one here, and it was just fine. I mean, and I don't want people to think that it was like, oh, it's not one of those things where like Chicago has got great Detroit style pizza.
It does.
And I think New York has Jets here.
We have a Jets. I walked by and it looked like the whole window was smashed.
Oh,
so that
no.
was a bad look for Jets. But we have a place called Emmett's that's supposed to be pretty good.
Okay.
For Detroit style.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a Jets here, man.
Yeah.
Totally.
And people should definitely like experience that. I feel like they would be a reliably good source of Detroit style pizza because like we enjoy Jets back home.
Oh,
so,
definitely.
Yeah.
Jets night is a great night, and there's Buddies, of course.
Of course.
But what about like local like one-offs, two-offs? Do you have any of those spots in mind?
We do go out for Buddies when we do. It's mostly a proximity thing. We
Yeah.
don't like to go very far, which
Totally.
means we generally just order Jets. I like ordering Jets Pizza Inn because it is a very good Detroit style pizza, but I can also like put my own chili oils and stuff on top of it.
100% agree. I love a condiment. We can talk about ranch
Yeah.
too. Ranch is pretty great.
Yeah.
But I want to hear a little bit now that the book is out and you're doing the tours and you're out in the world. But I know that was such a big commitment. Is there a thought that you're going to reboot your Eastern Market pop-ups? Because I just jealously would love to attend one because they looked so great, and just like retroactively looking at the menus you were doing and some of the video content, it's amazing.
Yeah, the problem with that is like the building where I filmed all that content, where I did all those dinners right now. It is like a sad story, but it's not the end of the story of that building. But it was in half construction. It was like in half demolition of becoming a full-fledged restaurant before the pandemic hit. And it just got like too expensive to continue on with that plan with the things that are going on now. And also I'm really busy. So it is in the grand scheme of things, something that I would like to bring back. But maybe like a little bit farther out in the future.
Yeah. So what about like a restaurant though? Is there like
opening a restaurant?
Yeah. You're like, I love your reaction.
No comment. I mean, I understand how hard it is now. I've always had a good understanding of how hard it is to run a restaurant. And so I will still like say with my full chest that this is an easier job. Mm-hmm. And so I'm happy to do this.
Respect
for now.
it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is such an honest take. It's the restaurant industry is impossible.
Yeah. I feel like I'm still tired from my time there.
John, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire Fast and Furious taste check. Are you ready?
Oh, God, okay.
Your favorite Detroit-only food?
My favorite Detroit-only food? Does Detroit-style pizza count?
I feel like we've covered that.
We covered that.
So let's go to the next one.
Another thing that I do like to bring people to when they come in town and stuff, like we do love the coney. The coney. I love the coney, and I do love, as a hangover meal, I do love like the coney chili on top of fries with a fried egg on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it runs all over the fries.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like that's an underrated use of the egg.
Oh, absolutely.
I love a runny egg on top of some fries. It's like a poutine kind of take on it.
It's giving coney poutine.
Giving coney poutine. The best morning pastry with coffee.
Oh, I'm more of a tea drinker.
Or with tea.
Okay, so I'm only going to say this because I'm in New York right now and it's one of the things that I crave, but I love a good sponge cake, and I really like spongies in Chinatown, and that goes really well with the tea. And I do like a fancy pastry with a coffee. I do like a pain chocolat or something like that, but I'm also the type of person who prefers like a cheap diner coffee, and while I'm here, I'll do a bacon, egg, and cheese with it.
So good.
Yeah.
It's always a New York move.
Yeah.
Any other restaurants or foods you're picking up in New York that you're here?
Obviously, I got to finally eat at Bonnie's, and that was, it was easier to write a book and have your launch party there than it is to get a reservation.
Yeah, it's so true.
And they deserve that 100%. And then like fun omakase, like an omakase here and there, and bagels every day.
Every day. Do you have a bagel spot?
The place that is close to my hotel is called Bagels and Schmear, and it is truly like it is good. It is good, but like, I will venture out to go to Baz's. I think it's on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, Baz's absolutely best bagels. The best dessert.
The best dessert. Ooh. After a meal, it would be an ice cream of some kind. I do like a fun ice cream, or like a fun flavored ice cream, like a buckwheat or a green tea. But if it was like going out for dessert, I do like those Taiwanese like tapioca pearls, hot grass jelly soups. They're not too sweet, which is the best compliment an Asian person can give to a dessert. With like the red bean and stuff like that. I love that. And especially now that it's getting cold. That's like all I want.
It's hot too.
Yeah.
A hot dessert is, we can't go wrong. The best bread.
Vietnamese baguettes.
100. So is there a bakery in Detroit that you like to go to?
No. Or I had a banh mi when I turned 30 in Vietnam. And I still am chasing the ghost of that memory of the best bread experience that I ever had in my life.
Something about the freshly baked bread on a banh mi in country in Vietnam is amazing.
Something about the airiness. It was like a baguette cloud that retained all the chew, all of the crunch, crispiness, but at the same time, it was just like it was like a cloud. That's all.
Yeah, it didn't like overshadow the condiments or the
meat.
It
didn't. But then at the end, like after I had the sandwich itself, I asked for like a loaf of just the bread, and I just ate that.
Oh man, damn, that sounds great.
Yeah.
The most underrated piece of kitchen equipment.
I would say I really like my ceramic grater. For like garlic or spices or ginger specifically. Like I do not like to use the microplane for the they're just hard to clean and everything, and this is just like this gorgeous little white dish that just minces everything so beautifully. I don't see them in a lot of restaurants or in a lot of kitchens, and I think like it would save people a lot of grief and a lot of time, and also it lasts a lot longer.
Yeah, I love the ceramics. It's also easier to clean.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than the microplane.
Yeah.
The most overrated piece of kitchen equipment.
Oh, I would say the microplane.
Yeah, right on. Sorry, microplane. Not getting kudos on this one. Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Ooh. Oh, man. I can say I've probably referenced or gone back and looked up Harold McGee's on food and cooking more than any other book. I don't think would automatically make it count as my favorite, but it has probably done the most to educate me.
It's gotten the most mileage in your kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. What about a favorite recent cookbook discovery?
So a book that I just picked up yesterday is My Everyday Lagos by Yewande Komolafe.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to her pop-up yesterday for lunch, and the soup and the suya beef were just like immaculate. So very good.
I love that you called that book out, and we had Yewande on the show recently. What a great book.
Yeah, and it's just vibrant and like just a beautiful, stunning thing, like one page after another.
Yeah, terrific choice. I love that. Couple more. Your favorite vegetable?
My favorite vegetable. Oh man. Can it be like a fruit that you cook like a vegetable?
Sure. Why
Are you
not?
going to ask me my favorite fruit?
No, we're not going to go fruit. We're going to go veg.
Okay. Well, then, like, it is a fruit, but a tomato.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find a good one.
It is hard. Oh, well.
Unless they're canned.
I mean, yeah, unless they're canned, but, we just came out of Michigan summer, so we had plenty.
Yeah. Favorite use of a tomato?
Sandwich.
Yeah.
I think that is the expected answer.
It's such a good choice. Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Tomato sandwich.
You just killed two with one stone. I love it. So let's unpack that. Hard cheese, soft cheese. What's the condiment? Mayonnaise or not? What's the bread choice?
Okay, so like the classic tomato sandwich, which is like the white bread, a thick, nice heirloom tomato, salt, pepper, and mayonnaise. Like that hits, and it's what most people understand to be the best way to eat the tomato sandwich, but the beauty of it is like it is in every form like just an accessible thing to make and eat. So I went through this period of time where I made a different kind of tomato sandwich every day for 3 weeks because I had like a very robust tomato plug in my CSA. And so I was like experimenting with different kinds, and I think we had decided that like a grilled sourdough with a specific type of tomato called the striped German tomato, salt and pepper on top of that with the curry mayo, where you like fry a little bit of curry powder in some ghee and then you mix that in with the mayonnaise. Like that one is really good.
Really good.
Yes, really good. Probably our favorite. But close second was a caviar tomato sandwich.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, made with a brioche, with also grilled brioche. And instead of mayo, we used creme fraiche.
Yep.
And that was made with a brandy wine tomato.
Yeah, creme fraiche and caviar on a grilled brioche.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow, so good. I feel like you're in the sandwich like headspace right now.
I am. It's very easy to do in the summer.
Yeah. It's amazing. The book is Kung Food. Jon Kung, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Oh, thank you for having me. Always great to be here.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.